Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. Humza Yousaf must be used to failure by now. After all, he fails at every single thing he does. And in an article that we're going to look at here, and it will come as no surprise to anyone, he's failed yet again in yet another achievement of disaster. He keeps setting himself these various goals and then failing to meet them. And let me tell you, the bar is fairly low and he still can't get over it. He set a target that he wants Scots to use 20% less car journeys by 2030. Kilometres travelled was the target. A 20% reduction by 2030. And so to meet that, he has to have certain targets each year going forward. And it isn't going to work. And of course it never will. It can't. You don't have an integrated transport system. The transport system you have is unreliable, is expensive. It puts people off using it. Until you can get something that works, people will keep using their cars. And of course, when you keep having roads in as bad a state as they are, it doesn't help either. People are having to drive further to go around all the closed bits, all the diversions, and all the traffic jams. It's almost as though you're a complete buffoon who doesn't know what you're talking about. It's a surprise to none. Let's have a look. Now, before we get into it, do please hit that subscribe button if you're yet to subscribe. It really massively helps the channel. We are getting there. We're going to make that 10,000 by the end of February, but only with your help. But once as we grow, we push the truth out further. And there is no greater truth than the fact that every morning Humza Yousaf must wake up, look in the mirror and think, what failure am I going to face today? What awfulness will happen? And how much ridicule will I have to endure as yet again another thing I plan to do crashes and burns? Well, of course, today, it's so much each day usually, but today it is the car journey target that he has failed to do. Humiliation for Humza Yousaf as the SNP set to miss another flagship, world-leading commitment. He keeps going, we're going to be the best in the world at this, and we're going to do that. You're not. You're not adequate enough. You're barely functional. You can't be the world leader in anything, except maybe failure. The Scottish Government has privately admitted that it is unlikely to hit its world-leading commitment to reduce car kilometres by 20% by 2030. It's not going to happen. Not while you've got a train system that is massively expensive and completely unreliable and doesn't go to all the places people need to be. The Scottish Government has privately admitted that another one of its key climate pledges is at risk of being missed, and it adds to Humza Yousaf's environmental woes his boasting at COP28 that he has come back to haunt him with a number of failures in that policy area. Although he wasn't invited to COP28, but he decided he'd fly there with a whole deputation on a plane, burning all that fuel for no reason whatsoever. How's that for the environment? Anyway, 4 years ago, SNP ministers outlined a world-leading commitment. We knew at that point it was going to fail. And this was to reduce car kilometres by 20% by 2030 to help reach net zero by 2045. Subsequently, of course, we've all learnt that net zero is a lie. It's impossible. It cannot be done. And it is now just being pushed as, well, we've got to keep saying it because we're committed to it now. But it will actually destroy everything. However, in briefing notes and analysis seen by the Scottish Daily Express, officials admit that the target is at risk because they have not been transformative enough. In fact, the reduction may only be 5% by the self-appointed deadline due to a rise in emissions following the end of the COVID pandemic. Also, the fact that buses are pretty dirty as well, and they actually produce way more toxins than the cars. It's funny that, isn't it? This route map with proposals to help with the goal has been delayed and now is expected to be published this year instead of autumn 2023. Yeah, they delayed it by a year because they knew the figures weren't going to happen. And this 2030 goal is now going to be 2040 goal, and they're not going to say 20%, they're going to say 15%, and blah, 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 just so they can have a win at the end of it. The SNP won't even be around by the end of it. Let's face it, they may not be around much after the next general election. It's all crap. It's utter crap. You've got roads falling apart, a train system that's outdated and just basically useless. You've got buses that run so infrequently that nobody will ever even look to take them. And even when they do run, they don't run at the right times. The published times are a joke. What else have you got? Cars. That's it. Especially when you're oop north in the great yonder beyond Falkirk, eh? Terror unknown for that lot. Anyway, the reduction may only be 5% by the self-appointed deadline. While Net Zero Secretary Mary McCallum, the Saturday Girl, is delaying the publication of the SNP Executive's climate change plan because she daren't release it now because it's so bad, and it failing to meet its legally binding greenhouse gas emissions target, this is the latest climate failure for the government to deal with. Mr Yousaf used his time at COP28 to boast about his country helping to lead the way in this area, and it turned out that he was boasting about a load of bullshit. But hey, is anybody surprised? Not me. Mary McCallum claimed that the world leaders were approaching them for advice, and this clearly also is a lie. Nobody was approaching Scotland for advice because, as far as they're concerned, Scotland is a basket case led by lunatics. Critics pointed out that the Scottish Government's attempt to hammer motorists were not having the required effect, and the fact that ScotRail tickets were being hiked up in price meant it was unlikely to attract any more people to give up their cars. Scottish Conservative shadow spokesperson Graham Simpson told the Scottish Daily Express, as usual, the SNP is delivering the worst of all worlds. They're hammering motorists and neglecting road maintenance, and now admit that none of it will help to meet their own targets. And they're only hammering the drivers because of her. A woman who hasn't got a clue, let's face it. Old Jeffrey doesn't know what she's talking about. Old Jeffrey, who takes the train to Aberdeen so she can be seen by the reporters coming off the train. Look at her, wonderful, using the train. At the same time, employed a driver to drive all the way up to Aberdeen from Edinburgh in a big limousine. So she had a limousine to drive round Edinburgh in. Then she gets back on the train to come home, and poor old Sod has to drive home from Aberdeen to Edinburgh on his own. Hey, how's that? How's that for green credentials? It's a joke, isn't it? Anyway, Simpson said, instead of pandering to the fanatical anti-car green partners, they should reverse their cuts to public transport and infrastructure, particularly in rural areas, and stop raising ScotRail fares so that Scots actually have options about their travel. When you make ScotRail so expensive that nobody can afford to ride on it, and still the service is so bad that nobody trusts it, nobody is going to give up their cars. If you want high public transport use, you have to subsidise public transport heavily. Go see how good public transport is run. Go to Switzerland, where it's cheap, it's effective, it's always on time. I mean, literally like clockwork, and everybody uses it. It's marvellous. Not here. Not anywhere in England either. Nowhere in the UK has got good public transport. Probably the best is London. But hey, you know, it's got the infrastructure and it's been around 110 years or something. But it's just a joke. Public transport in this country is way too expensive. It needs to be massively subsidised. Anyway, SNP ministers are also driven around in cars to attend events with a fleet of vehicles and drivers made available to them. Even Scottish Greens co-leader Lorna Slater enjoys trips to the northeast of Scotland and the Central Belt instead of using public transport. Well, we've already covered that. I said apart from that time with the train, and she sent the driver up because she couldn't use public transport in Aberdeen. Scottish Lib Dem climate emergency. If there was an emergency, they'd ban private jets. There's no emergency. It's bullshit. Let's stop calling it an emergency. Liam MacArthur said, like so many key climate pledges, this is yet another target that the SNP government are failing to meet. For too long, the Scottish government have relied on throwing out piecemeal schemes in the desperate hope that something will stick. Well, the only thing sticking is the shit to the wall, because it's hit the fan and gone everywhere, hasn't it? Because their whole policy is crap. Nothing they do works. Everything they do is a failure because half of it comes from the likes of her. I mean, I'll tell you how dumb she is. Shona Robinson is brighter than her, and Shona Robinson's got an IQ of 86. Jeffrey? Bimbo. Anyway, coming up. Round off, we'll finish the video. He can't help himself, you know. Failure is an option. For him, it's the only option. It's not as though he has a choice in the matter. No matter what he sets himself up to do, he's going to fail. He's never succeeded. No, literally, he's never succeeded at anything. His only real success was winning the leadership. And boy, was that a poison chalice. And even then, he only just scraped over the line, despite all the help given to him by everybody in the party. And he knows that his day of reckoning is coming. And that'll be the final humiliating failure of all, when he's ousted by a girl. Anyway, I shall stop there. Thank you very much for watching. Do hope you've found it enough to hit that subscribe button and leave a like. Until next time, stay safe, stay well, and I will speak to you later. Bye.